Hello, music appreciation students. Welcome to this lecture video. This one I'm going to talk about key in regards to part one of your textbook. And key comes after the chapters on harmony and melody. And what I want to talk about with key is something, this is a word you're going to see throughout the course, especially with regards to the titles of pieces of music. Now, in music notation, in the section on music notation, and the section on melody, and the section on harmony, we talked a little bit about what the note names are in Western music, how they're notated on a staff of 5 lines and 4 spaces. And with the regards to instruments, that sort of talked about what instrument falls in what range as far as high pitches and low pitches. But key is an interesting idea, and it's something that is not really unique, but is more emphasized in Western music, especially prior to the 20th century, than it is in other types of music around the world. Because what key determines is sort of a home base for an entire piece of music. It's kind of how we develop the idea of tension and resolution. When we think about this in terms of like a story, we have the build-up. When we think about a story arc, how it builds and builds and builds until the denouement, and then we kind of fall back down into some sort of satisfying conclusion or resolution. In Western music, generally we put key into one of 2 different modes, the major mode or the minor mode. And when we talk about key with regards to a piece of music, most of the time, pieces of music before the 20th century are going to center on one key, and it might modulate, that's a buzzword that you need to know, between different keys, but it will start and end in the same key. And that will kind of be the home base. The tension and resolution will revolve around that one pitch or chord or major or minor scale. And the idea of major or minor is really, if you're interested in reading and writing music, I would always recommend to take Music 110 at OTC. That's the fundamentals, all about reading and writing basic music. But when we talk about the major and minor key, we generally talk about the moods that are associated with major and minor. Major keys traditionally are set to happy moods. We're talking about weddings and Christmas carols and any kind of joyous or comedic event or anything like that. Major keys are all about triumph and happiness for Westerners. Now, minor keys, on the other hand, have traditionally been used for more depressing or sad or serious types of music, and especially when we're dealing with vocal music that gives a message, an actual message in lyrics, and not just an instrumental sound. A lot of word painting was done with the minor key. If somebody was talking about the underworld or the grave or war or death or anything like that, oftentimes a minor key was associated with that. Now, the aspects of major and minor are really just quite practical. It just depends on how you move from one note to the next in a scale or a series of notes, depending on whether you move by a half step or a whole step on the keyboard. And we're not going to dive too deeply into that. Like I said, you've got a whole course at OTC Music 110 if you're interested in that. But when we talk about the concept of key, I wanted to make sure that you understood that key is sort of a unique aspect of Western music where we have something that revolves around a certain pitch or a certain chord, and oftentimes sticks to major or sticks to minor, at least for the beginning and the end. Now, when we hit the 20th century, we actually have what's known as a crisis of tonality. It sounds a lot more serious than it actually is. We have a lot of composers like Stravinsky, like Schoenberg, Berg, Edgar Varese, Charles Ives, that start to question the idea of key. Why should one note in any piece of music be more important than all of the other notes? Sort of an equality of pitch type idea. And so, especially when we get into the 20th century, we start learning about Arnold Schoenberg, a German composer who sort of was the springboard for the concept of atonality, or music without a specific key or home pitch. Then we start to see this breakdown of what key is, which is why we have a trend in 20th century music called neoclassicism, where we start moving back to the forms and the keys of the classical period. But at least up until Richard Wagner at the end of the Romantic period, composers really stuck to the idea of the major or minor key and didn't deviate a lot from that. And so when you're looking at the concept of key in that section of part 1, I just wanted to make sure that clarify what key actually was and what the major and minor tonalities actually meant for us as Westerners.